Processed foods are impossible to completely remove from your diet, and that's okay, because if it weren't for processed foods, world hunger would be a far more significant issue. But if you're on a weight loss diet and your diet is full of processed foods, you're in for a rude awakening. So we're talking about processed foods, and more specifically a diet that's just filled with nothing but processed foods and what it can do to you and your weight loss journey. And by the way, I'm Mike. I'm a fat guy who's trying to not be fat anymore by making lifestyle changes. And first things first, let's talk about what processed foods actually are. A little definition might be helpful. So processed foods are foods that have been altered from their natural state through different methods. And there's a bit of a spectrum that really ranges from minimally processed foods, which is almost like a whole food, to highly processed. This is nothing you would ever find in nature. Minimally processed foods are items like pre-cut fruits, vegetables, and roasted nuts. So these foods do undergo a minimal amount of changes that make them convenient for consumption. Again, think of like somebody just cut up your cantaloupe for you so you don't actually have to take the whole melon and do it yourself. But on the other hand, highly processed foods often contain added sugars, unhealthy fats, and a bunch of artificial additives, which again, aren't necessarily bad for you, but aren't really that great for you either. And the highly processed stuff usually comes in packages with a long list of items, and I'm talking about stuff that I can't even pronounce. So I've got a can of Right and Light here. I don't know if you guys have heard of this. It's essentially, it's a no sugar, no carb, no calorie drink. So this is just an example. I'm gonna look at the ingredients and see, yeah, there is a long list of things. Some of the things, like I said, definitely I would struggle to pronounce. Acetylflame K. Now, I don't know much about acetylflame K, but it does not sound like a natural ingredient to me. I mean, of course not. This thing is in a can. My guess is it probably helps make it sweeter because it's in the sweetener category. Now, why is having a bunch of random ingredients or additives bad for your food? Well, I would like to get away from the good and bad categorization, but
tell him to keep playing. He's in too deep. I don't know.
Let's start with saying that there's not a lot of benefit to, or at least I should say from a nutritional standpoint, to all of this heavily processed foods. In fact, usually the benefits come to food storage and preservation of the food. But with that, oftentimes it involves reducing important vitamins, minerals, and fiber from whatever you're consuming. So potentially, if you have a diet filled with highly processed foods, you have a potential nutrient deficiency on the horizon. Other things could include potential weight gain or an increased risk of chronic disease, overall a pretty bad time. And we all want to avoid having a bad time. If you want to avoid even having a worse time on your fitness journey, consider hitting the like and subscribe button to Weight Warriors and let us know down in the comments down below what specific foods are hardest for you to give up. I'm curious, most of them probably involve processed foods. For me, it's really hard to give up ice cream. And again, I don't ever want to just give up ice cream. Ice cream is amazing, specifically cookies and cream, but there's a lot of stuff that's not ice cream, or at least not dairy in the ice cream. And again, I don't want to say good or bad, but it does change the satiety of the food, how full it makes me feel, and it changes again the nutrient density. Another problem with processed foods, or at least highly processed foods, is it can be a little bit like a wolf in sheep's clothing. Let's take something like almonds, for example, which have decent protein, lots of good fats, but typically when they go into be processed or highly processed into something, let's say trail mix, people often think that that's a healthy alternative or a healthy food, but really what you get is chocolate covered, sugar coated almonds with, again, a bunch of M&Ms and other stuff in there, which then the caloric density essentially doubles, and they're almost empty calories. And so what's worse is they're often marketed as a healthy alternative. And they'll say they're still healthy because it's nuts, right? It's almonds. And when it comes to weight loss, processed foods can be a hurdle. They're usually more calorically dense, but nutrient poor, which can make it more challenging to achieve a calorie deficit, or at least a good calorie deficit. And again, I don't like saying the good or bad, but I do say good here because a good calorie deficit means you're still getting your micronutrients, which is your vitamins, minerals, and fiber. But with a bad calorie deficit, that means you're probably going to be feeling less full. It's going to lead to increased hunger and a higher likelihood of overeating. And that's why it's absolutely crucial to learn how to properly read food labels. You can look out for processed ingredients or added sugars, unhealthy fats, and artificial additives. I mean, a general rule of thumb that I've seen people reference is if it has more ingredients that you can't pronounce than ones you can, you should probably be more cautious. This is a to each their own type of thing, so do your own research on this, and I could go more into specifics if you find a processed food that you're curious about. Comment down below as well. Also, if you want to learn even more about food labels, check out my video. I did a guide on food labels so you can stay more informed and help you stay on track with your weight loss journey. Now, we've been talking about processed foods and how, you know, they're kind of demonized, but still necessary. But the real question is how can we make healthier choices, especially if you're like me trying to lose weight? So I'm aiming to reduce, and I want to say reduce, not entirely remove, consumption of processed foods. And you've probably heard me talk about before a whole foods diet filled with nutrient dense foods. This is trying to move away from the processed foods into the whole foods. Now, this is step one in trying to remove processed foods, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to say goodbye to things like sodas, chocolates, or whatever processed foods that you like. However, I would recommend, as I'm currently doing, that I try to consume processed foods in moderation and prioritize whole foods. And remember, at Weight Warriors, we are not as much about restriction, we are more towards sustainability. So if you want a successful weight loss journey, don't just cut a bunch of stuff out, try to find things that you actually enjoy or at least can eat in moderation. Because you're more likely to stick to your diet if you still have some of these processed foods. Just understand that you can't have all of them all the time. Because we want the best odds, a better chance of maintaining our calorie deficit, and you have a better chance of losing that fat, and more importantly, keeping it off forever if you're not restricting yourself or feeling deprived. So choosing whole unprocessed foods has numerous benefits. They do provide us with the essential nutrients like vitamins, minerals, and fiber that we need. They also tend to be more filling and help us feel satisfied or satiated for longer. Now, processed foods have become a major part of our diet, but we do have the power to make healthier choices and understand what we're eating. And by actually understanding the risks, or at least reading the food labels, we can prioritize good decision making, healthy habits, and eat some processed but primarily unprocessed foods to help us take control of our weight loss journey and sustainably achieve our goals.